When I show you an image like this, what's the first word that comes to your mind? Naturally, many people would instinctively say blue, planet, or space. But for me, that word is fear. Pure, paralysing fear. The idea that we're just inhabiting a floating rock in the middle of this black abyss scares me. Looking at images of space like this make me feel lonely, anxious even. Like at any moment we could be swallowed up by this black abyss around us. What I'm describing to you is what's commonly referred to as astrophobia, the fear of celestial objects or others surrounding it. In this video, I want to run down some of the many aspects of space that I find both interesting and terrifying. I'll be looking at space itself, but also the depictions of space in media such as video games and films to really cover all bases. With that said, let's get started. First and foremost, we have the many planets of the Milky Way galaxy. I could discuss the multitude of other planets and stars we've identified across the galaxy, but I'd rather relegate this section of the video to what's familiar. Whether your eyes drifted off to a poster in your old classroom, or you watched a few too many episodes of Cosmos, we've all come across the planets of our solar system at one point or another. Though we would like to think that we have some idea of the scale of these planets, it really hits home just how small we are when comparing ourselves to these other celestial giants. And that's really what unnerves me about these planets. We play such a small part in this solar system, and should the stars align, no pun intended, we could quite literally be snuffed out in no time. If a planet such as Saturn were to even nudge close to Earth, catastrophic natural disasters would ensue. Tectonic plates would shift, rapidly leading to tsunamis, earthquakes. The Earth would quite literally rip itself apart. Not to mention that we would suffer long periods of time without the sun, freezing us to death. So, if the Earth ripping itself to pieces doesn't kill you, the hypothermia probably will. All these what-if scenarios are unsettling in their own right, but in my opinion, it's the planets themselves that unnerve me. These lonely giants filled with rock, ice, sulphur, no sign of life. Nothing. It's a very surreal thing just to look at pictures of these planets, knowing that they're out there somewhere. However, as well as being a visual wonder, these planets are just as much an auditory wonder too. Just listen to some of these sounds. Pretty spooky, right? Well, I mean, those other ones were spooky, but Saturn was just kinda there like... There are a few standout planets for me personally. Whilst I find all of them fascinating, the ones that immediately come to my mind when discussing planets are Neptune and Venus. Starting with Neptune, Neptune is a planet with a radius of 15,299 miles and is the densest planet in our solar system. With an outer layer made of hydrogen, methane and helium, and an inner... With an outer layer made up of hydrogen, methane and helium, and an inner layer consisting of water, ammonia and methane ices, it's a literal death trap for humans. You'd barely survive a few minutes on this ice giant, and that concept frightens me. Out there somewhere among the stars is an enormous planet filled with noxious gases and freezing temperatures. And should you ever find yourself careening towards this planet, you would quite literally only have minutes, seconds even, to take it all in before succumbing to conditions your body can't hope to withstand. Venus, on the other hand, is a much brighter and vibrant planet, but for the worst reasons. Comprised of carbon dioxide and, I shit you not, sulfuric acid rain, Venus is a planet that really gets under my skin. Again, no pun intended. Acid is one of those chemicals that unnerves me. Anytime I see characters in games or films scream as they burn up in a river of it, or have it splash on their face, it makes me really uncomfortable. So this idea that there's a planet out there where this fucking shit rains down on it 24/7 is wholly unsettling. All in all, I think I've made my point. The planets that surround us and those far beyond our reach have this strangely mysterious and threatening presence. Both visually and auditorily, these planets can make the imagination go wild. It always makes me laugh how in all these sci-fi movies we have these astronauts in terraforming colonies landing on these planets, both real and fictional. If any human were to set foot on most of these planets, they would quickly become vaporized by insane wind speeds, noxious gases, sulfuric acid, the list goes on. It's interesting to think about, but ultimately, after a while, it just begins to creep into my head and make me shudder. So, technically, the fear of space exploration falls into a separate category. Space phobia. Creative, I know. However, this is my video, and if you don't like it, fuck off. That out of the way, the whole idea of space exploration has unnerved me too, and is a big part of my astrophobia. When I see images like this, of astronauts hovering in this huge black abyss, or of the moon landing, it makes me feel very alone and isolated. Like, what if I was trapped out here, stuck in some big 1960s era spacesuit? No one else. No buildings, no sounds, no familiarity. Completely alone. Just me, space, and my thoughts. Speaking of which, can we talk about these spacesuits really quickly? Because Jesus Christ, these things are scary looking. The bulk of them, accompanied by that wide open fishbowl-esque helmet, lends a certain mystery to them. They look like these big celestial automatons, floating around planets and walking on their surface. Don't get me wrong, they're cool looking and a testament to human ingenuity, but if this fucker walked past me down a dark street, don't be surprised if I prematurely blow my fucking rape whistle. Right! The fear of isolation is something that really plays a part here. Though I'm not personally afraid of being isolated or alone, in the context of space, that fear is very real. But space exploration itself is what really kicks me here. Going far and wide, across the galaxy, away from what's familiar, and being smothered by the fear of the unknown. The mystery of it all makes my skin crawl. It's like staring down a dark hallway. No idea what's down there, but somehow, some way, you know there's something there. Now that I've given some kind of context to astrophobia, let's look at some media that builds on it. I've handpicked a few examples to show this off, ranging from films to video games. There's a whole heap of them out there, but I feel I can best communicate this sense of astrophobia through these few examples here. And who knows, maybe in doing so, you might be compelled to check them out yourself, which I would always highly recommend. Starting off tame, Universe Sandbox is pretty much what it says on the tin. The game offers you a universal sandbox to play around in, and whether you want to collide stars off one another, replace Earth's moon, fire lasers at other planets, Universe Sandbox gives you the tools to do so. The possibilities are endless in Universe Sandbox, but for all the fantastical elements the game brings to the table, there's still that sense of unease, floating around the vast expanse of space, colliding planets off one another, creating supernovas. The game really does drive home just how vulnerable we are. By playing God and doing all this really fucked up shit to planet Earth, my worst fears have been realised. Using a space laser to create massive tsunamis, smashing planets into Earth's surface, burning it up in 1,000-degree temperatures, all of Earth's worst possible outcomes can be realised. But for all the doom and gloom you can bring Earth's way, there's plenty more to see and do. One of my favourite things to explore being the simulations. Here you have pre-prepared scenarios, such as a bunch of Earth's moons bashing off one another, a comparison of the planets in our solar system, and my personal favourites, getting to fly side by side with satellites like Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 as they pass by the many planets in the Milky Way galaxy, taking some of these iconic photographs we've come to know and love. Whilst Universe Sandbox certainly irks this sense of astrophobia, it isn't necessarily petrifying. There's also a sense of intrigue and amazement in exploring all these different scenarios and getting to see these landmarks in history of space exploration. Don't worry though, the tension is only going to ramp up from here as we move on to our next example. Just bear with me, please. Doctor Who is a series that's had its fair share of creepy space-related episodes, but in this case I'm really stretching here by covering the episodes Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead. This episode sees the Doctor and Donna arrive on a library planet. Yes, a planet that is one massive library, as if it couldn't get any more exciting. Whilst there, they bump into a future mainstay of the series, River Song and her team of archaeologists. They've come to find out why the library has been closed the past 100 years. The Doctor soon discovers that the reason the planet was abandoned in such a short space of time is due to the arrival of a carnivorous alien microorganism known as the Vashta Narada. Hiding in the shadows, these microorganisms nestle in dark areas, and should any unfortunate soul bump into these creatures, they'll very quickly get turned into a Halloween decoration. The main reason I've lumped the Vashta Narada in with my astrophobia is due to how they're presented in the episode. Let's take the death of one of the archaeologists. As the Doctor is using his sonic screwdriver to scan around the room, Dave suddenly asks a question.
Hey, who turned out the lights?
No one, they're fine.
No, seriously, turn them back on.
They are on.
I can't see a bloody thing.
Dave, turn around.
What's going on? Why can't I see? Is the power gone? Are we safe here?
Dave, I want you to stay still. Absolutely still. Dave, can you hear me? You all right? Talk to me, Dave.
I'm fine. I'm okay, I'm fine.
I want you to stay still. Absolutely still.
I'm fine. I'm okay, I'm fine. I can't... Why can't I can't... Why can't I can't... Why can't I
He's gone. He's ghosting.
Then why is he still standing?
Hey, who turned out the lights?
And what follows is one of the most sudden and pants-shittingly scary reveals in all of Doctor Who. That there is how you make a 10-year-old lad shit himself into a coma and spend the rest of the night avoiding shadows in his house. This taps into that uncanny fear I get from looking at spacesuits. The fact that these carnivorous aliens could seep into your suit and eat you alive in milliseconds is horrendous. But the idea that you wouldn't know whether or not the person in the suit is even dead is more unnerving. Puppeting your body around in a pitch black spacesuit, luring more people into becoming enveloped in its shadow. Getting back to the realm of games, we have Alien Isolation. Easily one of the best horror games in recent memory. 2014's Alien Isolation is a masterpiece in every sense of the word. It's one of my personal favourite horror games, and there's a lot of people out there who'd agree with me. But let's not get caught up in the praise. That might be material for another video. Instead, let's look at how Alien Isolation is also every astrophobe's worst nightmare. Set on Sevastopol Station, you take control of Ellen Ripley's daughter, Amanda. Ellen, of course, being the protagonist of the original film. Sevastopol Station supposedly has the final flight recording of the Nostromo. More importantly, it's the final flight recording Amanda's mother gave before she disappeared. Now that Amanda has arrived on Sevastopol, she immediately comes to realise why the ship seemed in such disarray on the outside. The ship, after having come into contact with LV-426, discovered the same alien ship from the first film, and naturally brought aboard an infected crew member, with the alien nestled in their body. Now that the alien has hatched and grown to full size, it's terrorising Sevastopol Station. And when I say this thing is scary, I fucking mean it. The alien's AI is interstellar. Unlike many other enemies in horror games, the alien actively hunts you through pretty much every inch of the space station. The threat the xenomorph poses, combined with the sheer isolation of being on this abandoned space station, really curdles your blood. More importantly, that sense of astrophobia is higher than ever. I get chills looking out a window, seeing the emptiness of space, reminding me that I'm miles and miles away from any safe haven. Crawling around Sevastopol's samey corridors and seeing survivors fight amongst each other, it's the space equivalent of cabin fever, and everyone has a nasty dose of it. During the opening of the game, Amanda and her team are swept away by debris exploding from the ship's exterior, and the whole situation really got me thinking. What if I were in this position, getting swept away into that big black abyss? Amanda of course sticks the landing as their cord is pulled and arrives on Sevastopol. But what if she didn't make that landing? Instead, being flung into space with no chance of rescue? Because after all, in space, no one can hear you scream. Whilst we're on the subject of the Alien series, let's now take a look at the original film. In my eyes, this is where I originally got this sense of unease from space, and what might be lurking in it. Much like the game that later continued its story, Alien is a masterpiece, and it has stood the test of time as one of the best horror films ever made, and one of my personal favourites. To this day, I haven't seen a horror film as moody, industrialised and subdued as Alien. The basic plot synopsis is that the crew of the Nostromo, a commercial towing vehicle, pick up a distress signal from the nearby LV-426. They ultimately decide to touch down on the planet and investigate, coming across the same spaceship seen in Alien Isolation. And much like the game, people can't seem to keep their fat fucking heads away from the eggs. Kane, played by John Hurt, awakens later on after the alien removes itself from his face. Whilst having dinner, Kane begins choking, and something tells me it wasn't the food.
Oh, God!
No, no, no!
Don't touch it! Don't touch it!
The facehugger, as it's known, laid an egg in Kane's body, which then hatched during the dinner scene. From here, The crew of the Nostromo, much like that of Sevastopol Station, are terrorised by the xenomorph, and it's absolutely panic-inducing. However, how does this all blend into the topic of astrophobia? Well, like I said, this was really the first film I ever watched where the fear of space presented itself. I absolutely adore the shot of the Nostromo preparing to touch down on LV-426 as the planet almost swallows the light of the star in the distance. The planet itself also has this really inhospitable and dangerous atmosphere about it. Almost like if the alien doesn't get you, some hazard on the planet's surface will. The set pieces in Alien are incredible and do well to exacerbate this sense of astrophobia you get while watching it. But it's no good talking about Alien without its star, the alien itself. The xenomorph is the single best alien design I've ever seen, not only because of how it looks, but how it moves. With its enormous toothy head and spear-like tail combined with its strangely humanoid body, it's H.R. Giger's magnum opus. More importantly, however, the xenomorph might be single-handedly the entire reason I became astrophobic. The idea that somewhere out there in the vast reaches of space is a monster like this, nestled somewhere on the surface of a planet, and it's made my skin crawl for the better part of a decade. The xenomorph and the planet it came from is everything I fear about space. It's mysterious, foreign, and hostile. It's without a doubt the best antagonist put to film, and I'll make sure it retains that crown for years to come. Finally, we arrive at Solipsis, and if Alien is my favourite space-related film, then Solipsis is the counterpiece to it, being my favourite space-related game ever made. The best part? This game is an independent project made as part of the DreadX horror game bundle. With virtually no budget and having been made in 10 days, Solipsis offered me one of the most nerve-wracking and genuinely uncomfortable experiences playing a game. And the most shocking part is that the game itself is only 10, maybe 12 minutes long, but those 10 to 12 minutes are some of the scariest I've ever sat through. The opening of the game has this very somber and quiet mood, with an introductory narration that gives us an idea of what our main character is like. The game then sets us loose on the moon's surface. We walk around, taking readings of the planet's gravity and bullshitting with the other astronaut in the shuttle. As you take more and more readings, it becomes apparent that the moon has some sort of subsurface feature. However, as you move further and further, this subsurface feature stretches for literal miles. It's impossible to tell just how hollow the moon is. This is what's known as the hollow moon theory. The idea that the moon is hollowed out either naturally or artificially, with some people believing the moon to have a massive cavernous interior, whereas others believe it may be some sort of a spaceship. As you explore more and more of the moon's surface, your reader soon tells you that the reading is minus 649 milligaules, suggesting that the moon is hollow. Here we see easily the game's greatest mechanic: rationalizing what you're seeing. This really unnerving image of your character's face in his spacesuit pops up. and all you have to do is drag the corresponding symbol to his head, thus rationalising the situation. Naturally, he assumes the equipment is faulty, but he's cut off by the other astronaut as his shuttle's thrusters suddenly propel him from the moon's surface.
Hold on, I need to adjust my orbit. Houston, I'm near that large satellite, please advise. Houston, surf it. Do you read the problem with my thrusters? I'm too close. I'm kidding. I'm too close.
And just like that, my worst fear has been realised. With the shuttle destroyed, our main character is quite literally stranded. No shuttle, no escape. Absolutely nothing. What else is there to do but explore the moon more? Walking for what feels like an eternity, you finally come across what can only be described as a stairway to the moon's core. This isn't possible. This shouldn't be possible. And yet, here it is. We again need to rationalise the situation. But notice these arrows protruding from the shapes. None of these explanations make sense, so naturally, they don't fit. What do? Bash the size of the shapes off the screen, knocking off the arrows. We have to make it make sense. Judging by the hammer and sickle, we can ascertain that this likely takes place during the space race of the 1960s, as the character is seemingly blaming this whole ordeal on space communists. It doesn't make sense, but what else would in this situation? With no other option, our character simply descends the stairs, deep into the moon's core. By the time we reach the bottom, we are now at the mercy of whatever is lurking down here. Noises in the distance, shapes moving through the dark, and before long, distorted voices over your communicator. How does this add up? What's making those noises? I'm stuck here for the rest of my life, aren't I? I've snapped, I have to be dreaming. I've got it. And just like that, another marker appears. We walk towards it, and we suddenly become the thing that's being rationalised. But what are we rationalising? Astrophobia is easily one of the more fascinating and bone-chilling phobias out there, both in reality and many of the films and games we see it in. Astrophobia is one of those phobias that I never see brought up enough, in amongst the multitude of other phobias we see videos on from the YouTube community. By the way, these videos are fantastic, please go and check them out. I hope that here, at the end of the video, you'll have come to understand the sheer terror space offers up. But more importantly, I hope that you'll be compelled to immerse yourself in all space has to offer, whether you watch Pluto ASMR on YouTube, or take a look at some of the films and games that present space in all its finery. Yet again, big thanks to everyone for tuning in. Fairly big departure from what I usually do, but having become interested in space again, and looking back at my old PS1 aesthetics analysis video, I just went wild brainstorming ideas. I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and with the grace of the man upstairs, I'll see you back here very soon.